Hello, and welcome to this session on data analytics and AI and the role of the transformation in the real estate sector. It looks like you got stuck with me. This is my second session. My name is Natasha Terinova. I am a director at Reach, and we are a VC-backed international scale-up program. And structurally, we are a part of Second Century Ventures, which is an international investment arm of National Association of Realtors in the US. So it's great to be here, and welcome Sébastien, and welcome Dan. So this is my second take at the hybrid panel, which I think actually works fantastically well. It'd be really nice to hear what you think. If you guys would like to answer questions from both Sébastien or Dan, please use the instructions on the top of the screen there, because the questions I will be able to see via the iPad. So I'm fairly new to the prop tech. I've been a clean tech entrepreneur for most of my life, and yesterday as I was falling asleep, I was thinking that, you know, if we take emotions out of our life, we literally are a data trail. So it's amazing to have such different experiences in the panel today, and this is my opportunity to learn, and I hope that you'd find the session very interesting. So, Dan, I'd like to start with you, and you've worked in property for your entire life. Would you tell us a little bit on how the real estate has transformed and what has evolved in the last years?
Yeah, sure. And hello, everybody. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but it's delighted to be able to join virtually. So I have worked in real estate all my career. It sounds as though that's not necessarily a good thing, but I think it is. But definitely from a data point of view, it's changed dramatically in the last few years. So real estate is a very slow-moving sector, and actually often that's the reason it's so attractive. So as an investment class, or as a place to live or to work, it's nice to have something that's tangible, slow and solid. But that means that things don't happen very fast. So the data that we've been able to collect in the past doesn't grow very quickly, and we've not then needed to use it for some of the decisions. And I think in the last probably 5 years, the range of data that's out there now, the range of data that informs decision making is growing so fast, and perhaps things like big data and AI are things that we'll come on to later. But the real estate sector has worked out that the data sets it's always used are still important, but they need to be added to much, much more by new data sets. So to give some examples, for example, productivity, which is one of the hardest things to measure, but also the impact on the environment that a building's having, or the air quality, or travel times, which we're seeing are going to go up the agenda very, very quickly. The drop of COVID-19 is that these changes haven't really changed direction because of COVID-19, but they've just accelerated dramatically. So we're going to be using lots more data in the future, but lots of different variety as well as just the volume.
Thanks a lot, Dan. So I had the pleasure to meet Sébastien yesterday over the phone, and he told me a little bit more about the business of Meilleurs. And I think for the benefit of international audiences that are listening to us today, and I know that our Canadian office woke up really early to hear us talking about the data and AI and to learn more about the expertise that you have. Would you be able to introduce yourself and to talk a little bit more about the business, please?
Thank you, Natasha. Yes, I'd be happy to. I guess Dan just spoke about making better, more informed decisions in real estate. From what I believe about Dan, that he speaks more about a commercial real estate space, maybe not exclusively, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm one of the 4 co-founders of a business based in France called Meilleurs, which we built after a personal experience. So I speak from a consumer standpoint, and I was relocating from the UK, where I spent 10 years, about to buy a flat for my family in Paris. And I was really amazed by the lack of information about the market. And I wanted to know whether the market was going up or down, and no one was giving me, I guess, straight or consistent answers. And I wanted to know whether that flat that I was looking at was properly priced or not. And I was not getting any proper information on that. And that was really very surprising to me. I was really not a specialist in the real estate space. I was coming from an investment banking, then venture capital background where before making any investment, we would do a lot of research, get a lot of data. But when it came to making your most important personal investment, buying a house or a flat, then you were dry. So this is where the idea of building a solution that would bring better information to consumers on the real estate market, bringing transparency on prices and transparency on professionals, realtors, came up. And we built Meilleurs Agents in 2008. 12 years later, Meilleurs Agents is primarily a French platform where we have, on the one hand, about 2 million unique visitors every month visiting the site to price their properties, the one they want to sell, the one they buy, and look up for the most suited realtor to accompany them in their project. And they don't pay because it's entirely free for consumers. On the other hand, you've got about half of all French realtors, that's about 12,000 of them, subscribers, paying subscribers to the platform so that they are exposed to the right audience, especially to get instructions to sell properties. So we all know classified portals, like Rightmove in the UK or SeLoger in France, that connects prospective buyers with agents. From a realtor's standpoint, Meilleurs Agents complements that value proposition by bringing prospective sellers with agents. Now, I just finished, and sorry for that long-winded explanation, but you gave me that opportunity and it was too precious to let it go. To achieve what we do, we digitize pretty much everything in the market. For the French audience, and some of us who know us, we digitize all buildings, all property, and pretty much everything that the agents do.
This is fantastic. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what role AI plays on the platform and the applications of it? And I'd also like Dan to actually start chipping in and maybe parallel the service that Sébastien provides in France. Does it have the place in the UK? And how do we do things in the UK? Are there any differences? So if we can start with Sébastien with application of AI and then moving to Dan into parallels with the UK market.
So, I mean, Meilleurs Agents was built as a data platform first and a data science platform first, because the idea was that we would bring transparency to the market by giving a representation of the entire market to the audience. So when you go onto our site, you can zoom in and look at every property in France, every address, and we'll come up with a price. Sometimes we have more than that. Sometimes we have a full description of the property. Sometimes we have pictures. And as time passes, we try to bring as reliable a digital representation of the entire market as possible. So we gather data year after year, adding today about 11 layers of data. So data comes from the French notaries, they come from public sources like the INSEE, they come from users, because when a user registers on the site, he gives a description of his property, the one he wants to buy or sell. Realtors, because if they want to be properly promoted on the site, they have to transmit to us all their activity, the recently sold property, and a full description of them. So all those data, and I skip on other sources, but all those data layers constitute the basis for our price maps and our estimation tools. Now, data is good, but data without science doesn't make sense, and we're there to provide information, not data, because data is noise. Information on what is the price of this, is that going up, is that going down, can I trust this person? So you need to turn data into science, and we have a team of about 30 data scientists, which is probably the largest data science team in Europe for real estate, I believe. It's quite big. And AI, or specifically machine learning, has started to play a role year after year in some aspects of the platform that can be applied to when we look at listings and very vast volumes of listings that have pictures, that have texts. Natural language processing is used so that we understand the text within massive amounts of listings so that we can categorize them without any human intervention. Image recognition, so that we know and we can tell apart a building that dates from the 18th century, from 20th century, whether it's a detached, semi-detached, fully detached house, this sort of thing. And this is where machine learning over the last few years has been used and is very useful to us. Now, lastly, and I finish there, there are some tools that we have built over the years so that not only can we give a price to property, but we can also give some prediction about where the market's going in terms of prices. How do we do that? Because people come massively to the site to estimate the property, but they also tell us whether they intend to buy or sell in a given location. So we can track over time, by zone, the relationship between supply and demand, which we all know is a key driver for price movements. Now, we've backtested this over the years, and what we know today is that in most zones, the largest cities, when we have enough data, we can predict where prices are going to go in the next 6 to 12 months with a very strong accuracy, and we call that ITI, Indicateur de Tension Immobilière. So I stop there. But AI is everywhere in the platform.
That's very insightful. Thanks a lot for that, Sébastien. So we can clearly see that this is critical in giving transparency to the market. Dan, can I turn to you right now and get you to talk about the different applications of AI and data analytics in your experience? Potentially, you know, in the intersection with the UK market, we'll see how your experience differs with Sébastien's.
Sure. So my background is probably a mix between commercial and residential. So I've looked at both of those areas, and I think that everything that Sébastien said was actually a really good run through of some of the areas that you could look at from a data point of view. So technology can help from collecting the data and bringing it together as a first instance, and that then breaks down into a number of areas. So either collecting new types of data that haven't been collected before, or using technology to collect data sets that have been available before but have just been very difficult or very manual or very costly to be able to collect. So some of the technologies that Sébastien was talking about are all about the data collection, and absolutely, as he says, having a load of data is lovely, but actually doesn't really do anything unless you get insight out of it. So that's really where the analytics come into this, whether that be machine learning, big data, artificial intelligence. It's all about technology to make sense of that huge volume of data that we've now got access to. And I think there are two things that happen in the way of insight. One is very broadly telling you what has happened, and I think data can bring a great independence and objectivity, although there are some challenges with that, which maybe we'll come on to later. And the other thing is what's going to happen. So again, Sébastien was touching on both of those. So what's happened in the past, but also moving forward, what a price is going to be, where's demand going to be, whatever it might happen. So absolutely, if you look at the UK market, and I think pretty much any property market in the world, the need for collecting data, both new data and collecting existing data better, is absolutely there. The need to get insights out of it is absolutely there. There's no point having data unless you are going to use it for something informative. And absolutely, people want to know what has happened and what is going to happen. Now, there are some local issues which I think do change the outcome there. So, for example, public data, which was mentioned, different countries have different amounts of public data that's made available in different ways. So, in the UK, for example, the Land Registry provides very good open access to price paid for properties, and in other countries that doesn't exist. So, clearly, that's the centre of a lot of residential property decisions, is that contextual market pricing. So there are different ways of getting that. And in the UK, for example, that's easier to get than in perhaps some other markets. The other thing I'd say, just picking up on the analysis, is what's happened is always important. And that's the way that real estate has really worked, is we're very evidence-based. But moving forward, we need to be a little bit more forward-thinking. And the interesting debate is, how do you start taking what is a fact into a prediction? Now, that's something that technology is very good at, because it can look for the trends and it can start foreseeing what is likely to happen. But there's also an interesting debate about the responsibility of people within that and how do we take regulated roles and forecasts into account. So, for example, the RICS regulates valuations in the UK and around the world. How can they regulate a valuation which is based on what is likely to happen rather than what has happened? And that's where we get into an interesting debate about the role of people going forward. But broadly, yes, I completely agree with Sébastien. I think all of those areas have got huge value in all markets around the world. They just have a slightly different flavour and different emphasis in different countries.
That's actually interesting. Thanks a lot, Dan. And that organically takes me to my next question to Sébastien. So I know that Meilleurs, if I did pronounce that right, my French is not getting better. So
much better than my Russian. So.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's very kind. So you were bought in 2019 by the German company, and they wanted to utilize your data expertise and roll it out to other countries. So with Dan just talking about the differences in availability of data, what are the challenges in introducing what you do into different territories?
That's true, Natasha. Last year, we got bought by Axel Springer, which is a German-based international media conglomerate. Years ago, they started to make investments in the digital real estate space, in the classified space. So they have controlling, stakes in Sologer, in Immowelt, in various geographies. And they bought us thinking that we were part of the solution for the emerging trends in the transformation of that industry, not only for consumers but also for professionals, and not only in France but across geographies. So you're right, you cannot just roll up our solution across geographies and say, knock, knock, hey, we enter into the German market, which the team is currently doing. So our data science team is currently working on price maps in Germany, estimation tools in Germany. So the data sources are not the same. The provision of information from the state, which Dan was mentioning, probably championed by the UK market, because access to data in the UK is really excellent, maybe second only to the US. In France, we were lagging behind, but there's been some catch-up last year with the provision by the French government of the last 5 years of transactions, with maybe not enough details. It's called demande de valeur foncière, but it's going really in the right direction. In Germany, we don't have such data source, but we have data from the customers of Immowelt. We have data from listings. And coming from a country like France, which until recently was really not transparent, we have the ability to make do with uneven and incomplete data sources, and wherever we go, we'll come up with the best available solution. And as time goes, be able to incorporate new data layers and improve our models, because it was built in from day one as something that could navigate geographies and adjust to various data sources. So it goes very fast. I'm not supposed to say too many things about this. I know there are some confidential issues, so I'm looking at Delphine. But I know it's going very fast, and we're going to be able to release some very good stuff in Germany, really leveraging on what we've done in France. So it's going to be much quicker than having started from scratch. Other geographies will follow.
That's very interesting. Thank you. So I think, the audience already understood that I have spent many sleepless nights preparing for this panel. It's an incredibly interesting subject. And yesterday, actually, my bedtime reading was Dan's recent article that was only published yesterday. And that was, get the technology right and the rest will follow. That's a beautiful piece that was written for EG. And it would be really interesting to... Well, it'll be great, I think, if Dan, you can elaborate a little bit more on the types of data and the new insights and how this all sort of fits together in this new world where we interact with technology and engage with it at the rate we've never done before.
Yeah, sure. So I'm glad you saw the article. I think the point of that really is there's an awful lot, against the backdrop of COVID, there's an awful lot of talk about the role of property moving forward, and all properties, residential, retail, industrial. And for the sake of this argument, I picked on office because that's where a lot of the conversation is. But I think the same principles apply to everything. And there are lots of debates about trying to be black and white about the answer. So everyone is going back to the office 5 days a week and nothing's going to change. And then you speak to someone else and people want to work from home 5 days a week and the office has got no role in the future. And of course, the real answer is going to be somewhere in between, and different people want a different outcome. So the real message of that article, which I think is incredibly important, is that we really need to focus on individuals and people. And for me, one of the biggest shifts that's going to happen over the coming years and decade, and COVID has accelerated because I think this was already happening, is the focus on people much more than dumb buildings. Now, to be able to measure people, what they're doing, how we can better meet their needs, and how we can do that on an individual basis is going to require data. So the debate about the office in the future, where it will end up, how it's going to impact cities versus rural or so on, I think is still open and open to debate. There's still going to be a changing picture on that as we go in and out of lockdown and people get used to technology and people miss people in the office. But what's absolutely true is whatever's happening, data is going to play, and technology generally is going to play a very substantial role in facilitating that in the future. So all of a sudden it becomes, how does a company enable their workforce to work well? And technology is going to be a key part of that, of course, in the office, but also how they're able to work in a train or on a coffee shop or at home. And so it's going to be much more focused on working for the individual employee to allow them to do things. Of course, some people want to be in the office all the time, and some people do jobs that can't be out of the office. But on the whole, the technology is there to support the drive towards much more central human-focused buildings, whether that's to live in or to work in. So moving forward, I think that the key here is we shouldn't wait to see what the answer is, because that might not become clear for a while, and in truth may change on an ongoing basis. But unquestionably, data technology is going to be a fundamental platform for that. And so making sure that we plan for that and build that into our thinking now is absolutely critical.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Dan. It's just, the natural question that I have is that how can we use all of these predictive models, but at the same time providing legal security for an ultimate data owner? Is it not an inherent conflict in there? Maybe, especially if it's a personal data that we're talking about in both residential homes and the office. So, to think about, everything, from smart speakers to any other piece of technology that measures how you interact with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are a couple of different points there. So one is about the prediction of where things are going, where I think technology is exceptionally good at looking at trends and identifying where they go. And in certain situations, these are going to work much better than people. And in other situations, I think people are going to be better. So the predictions and going forwards is going to be a shift for the sector, but absolutely technology has a very substantial role to play in that. I think the wider point about data ethics is a much more complicated one, and I think is going to pan out over the next several years. For me, the very biggest issue that we're going to focus as a sector in real estate, in residential, commercial, and everything in between, is going to be about the data ethics. We are very used to building buildings that are made of brick and concrete or some other material that doesn't do anything apart from let people work or live in it. But we're now building digital platforms. They are real-world digital platforms that collect data with all the sensors and technology that we're putting in these buildings. So we are collecting more and more information about people, especially against the backdrop of the sector becoming more human-centric. We're going to be creating huge volumes of data that we are collecting and using, and we have to find a way of making sure that's done correctly. And for me, the data ethics is going to be one of the most important things that we need to look at. I'm involved with an organisation called the Real Estate Data Foundation, which is a not-for-profit helping to raise awareness in this space. And data ethics is something that is going to be very complicated to come up with rigid standards, because the answer is going to be different in different times for different people at different buildings. But what we can do, which I would urge people to have a look at and really build into any thinking that they're doing now, is work towards some very basic principles. The Real Estate Data Foundation has 6 simple principles that we're encouraging people to work to. And to be honest, it's all about being transparent and open. So you can collect data for people, but don't use it unless you're communicating to them. Of course, if you're collecting thousands of data sets, it can be very complicated, and you can't put in 1 million pages of terms and conditions. But the most important principle here is being proportionate, open, and transparent about what you're doing to the people who are in your buildings or at home.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Sébastien?
I think what Dan is saying is super important because, and resonates with what we do, because we collect huge amount of data on consumers' projects. We know who they are, we know where they live, we know what they want to buy, what they want to sell.
Like, yeah.
We've got all their details. And they entrust us with all that information. And on the other side of the platform, we've got realtors who die to have access to this data. And the very first thing we decided from day one is that we would never give out this data freely or unknowingly to the realtors, which is a tension that you have to negotiate on the platform. But trust in a platform that will not cheat with your data is absolutely paramount. And that's the basis for everything. And then during this lockdown, like 6 months ago, we launched a product that allows realtors to connect and to contact with prospective sellers who know who the prospective sellers are. The realtors don't know who they are and where they are, but the platform does. And we make the connection by allowing realtors through us to connect and contact a prospective seller. So the platform plays the role of a connector, but also a gatekeeper, where we provide the, I would say, anonymity layer, protecting the consumer, while allowing the realtor to market himself in his zone, while not having to get out of his shop, as he was incapable of doing for 2 months. So that's, I think, one illustration where you behave responsibly with the data that users entrust you with. So you build models with that, but you make sure that people feel confident about conveying this data to you, because you will not misuse them. And I think that's one of the core principles on which all platforms should be built.
That's very interesting, and that actually very much cross-references with what we see as a program and a VC fund. Data and AI is one of our key verticals, and we see a lot of solutions that are aimed at realtors to help them with lead generation, to filter through the real buyers. Also, there's another host of solutions that increases and improves the user experience in search. So I'm going to take a question from the audience. I think I've been indulging into interviewing you guys myself for a long time. So we've got a question from the audience, and it's: do you think artificial intelligence and data analytics have more potential growth than other technology, given it attacks problems that are the core business of real estate? Would you like me to read that again?
The tax problems?
No. Do you think AI and data analytics have more potential growth than other technologies, given it attacks problems, yes, that are in the core business of real estate? I guess let's rephrase it a little bit, given that it addresses the core problems that are the core of real estate.
Dan, you have a shot?
Shall I have a go first? So I think that individual technologies get talked about a lot. So artificial intelligence, and then separately data, and then we get into all sorts of buzzwords, big data and sensors and 3D printing and blockchain. The truth is, none of these technologies are very often going to work in isolation. It's a combination of all of them. So data is going to be the underlying foundation for all of this. So from my point of view, data is going to be the most important aspect. I think artificial intelligence is going to be a very substantial part longer term in making a lot of very intelligent sense out of that. We are getting a huge amount of data that is going to be collected. It doubles every couple of years. It's growing exponentially. And we're also getting better at storing and looking for trends for historic data. And we just simply can't cope with that as people. We're just not going to be able to manage that. And that's where technology is really good. Making several million calculations and adjusting it every time it does so is really not that hard for technology, whereas for a human it can be pretty tricky. So I'm not sure I would say that AI and data in itself have a better technology growth than anything else. I think data is going to be the underlying foundation for everything, but I would certainly agree with, I think, the premise of the question there, which is that artificial intelligence will allow us to do a huge amount when the data is available. And a lot of those tasks will be the things that people do today in real estate, the core tasks of that. I would just also add one other thing, though, that doesn't mean that humans are not going to be doing things. I think if you look throughout the history of time, technology takes away some of the mundane manual or calculations that are done. The creativity, the judgment, the ethics is still going to be absolutely human-driven. And I think the successful real estate business, company, or person of the future is going to be the company that really embraces technology and really leverages it, but also is able to offer that human aspect to it as well. So I think the future, for me at least, is going to be a combination of human and technology. It's all going to be data-based, and AI will be a substantial part of that.
And thanks a lot for that, Dan. I've got actually a question specifically for you, Sébastien. So now you're a part of Axel Springer. You have the sellers' leads, the buyers too, the prices. When will you become an iBuyer? As have already part in Open Door.
Sure. I guess those platforms combined, classified portals, our platform combined may have a formidable, I guess, power in identifying buyers, sellers, and knowing prices and price directions. Now, I think it'd be a mistake to think that that will eliminate people from the equation. Just like Dan pointed out, AI and data will shake up the market, that's for sure. So the market will not remain as it is today, and I think it's good for consumers and even for realtors that do a lot of low value-added mundane tasks that I think technology can take out of the equation. So the market will be disrupted profoundly in the years to come, I'm sure, but I'm absolutely certain that realtors and humans will remain a central part of the market. So, and that's not exactly the question, because the question is about when do you become an iBuyer. But first I want to answer that question about will platforms, and will Axel Springer and Meilleurs agents within it be in such a position that we can eliminate all humans. I don't think it's going to be the case. I don't wish it, and I don't think it makes sense. Humans are super important to get sellers and buyers to actually agree. Now, and there is a fair part of psychological, legal, commercial value added that need to be brought to the table for a transaction to complete. And I don't see in the foreseeable future that the machine, let alone platforms like ours, will be able to replace that. Now, for iBuyers, we see them emerge in the US. They have up to 5% market share in some cities. I'm not sure that in the current environment that their market share still grows. I don't see, again, that in the foreseeable future, iBuyers will take much larger market shares in the most liquid markets. Will the group take a stake in one of those places? Why not? It's already the case in the US, so that we see how it operates. But I don't see that as a threat to the way that the market operates today.
Thanks a lot. And I've got a question that I'd like to address to both of you, Dan and Sébastien. So what is more important in AI model, technology or data?
Dan?
Oh, no, sorry. Well, I mean, an AI model is not data in that sense, and can be programmed to make sense of the data it has. Without data, it's not able to do a great deal. So I guess the answer is to get real insights using artificial intelligence or any other technology. I mean, we're not just talking about artificial intelligence. I think that is already on the horizon and being used in some instances, but it's going to develop a lot over time. But I still think there's an awful lot of data analysis that can be done in other ways, and I think that that can only be done off the basis of data. So I'm going to say that they're both important. Without data, it's not possible, and then getting the insight out is what you really need, and there's no point having data without that insight.
I hear data and technology. I'd say, for me, there is a third pillar, which is science. Obviously, we need data, we need technology, we need computing power, without which, 20 years ago, everything we do was not possible. So technology is obviously absolutely paramount. Now, science on top of that is important, because you can have access to massive data, may have big computing power, but at the end of the day, your algorithms, your science is not right, and you provide bad information, and we see that. And we have had lots of competitors, even in France, that had access to pretty much the same data as we had, but didn't put enough emphasis on science, and that showed at the end of the day. Today, I said that we have a team of 30 data scientists, probably half, or maybe more data engineers than scientists, but it's probably 12 or 14 science guys, with PhDs in math, in stats, in some fairly hard subjects. Plus, we have a scientific committee and connections with 5 of the most prestigious research and mathematical labs in France. People don't know that, but they are really at the core of everything we do. And we do not release a new index or a new algorithm before it's been tested and proven and then checked by people in the academic world. And we think it's super important. And I've worked in the US, and that was common to see those links in the US between the academic world and startups. It's less the case in Europe, a bit less maybe, and certainly not so much in real estate. When you look at the research space in real estate in France, it's very poor, which is bad. When you look at research, you find it in the US, sometimes in the UK, but almost never in France. So science is, in my opinion, the third large pillar.
Thank you. So we've only got a few minutes left together, so I'm going to take one last question from the audience, and it is, will data analytics and AI impact more the buying and the selling of assets, B2C or B2B, or the user experience or consumer journey? It'll be very interesting to hear both of your perspectives on that. Dan.
So I think it's going to change everything. I think, as Sébastien was saying there's some really interesting points that are coming out, which are probably an entire session on their own. One of the things I think is the most important thing here is about trust and understanding the use of data within any decision making. And if you're using a software platform, then you're putting the responsibility of the data decisions and the way things are done in their hands. And so trust, brand, the impact of people becomes more and more important. And I think that's something Sébastien said right at the beginning, is all about trust and how do you share data. Because I think those technology companies are going to have a lot of responsibility in that. To give you an example, I could make up a data set about the house prices in France in the next 10 minutes. It would be completely meaningless. It wouldn't help anyone. But that doesn't mean that the data set doesn't exist about something. And so actually what becomes important is not necessarily having the data set, but actually being able to trust it, and then how is it interpreted and how is it put into analysis. So for me, AI will help all of those different journeys, where it's the analysis of B2B or B2C, consumer journeys. It's got an opportunity for us to use data better in all of those. But what's going to be key here is whether you can trust, and how do we trust that element going forward, especially on the analysis point of view, but also the data. How can we trust that it's a fair source of data that's insightful rather than misleading?
I think we're at the beginning of a fascinating era where, when I look at the last 10, 12 years, so much progress has been made. Lots of the things that we said we would do were deemed impossible. Now they're taken for granted. But I think that what's about to come in the next 10 years is mind-blowing. And probably if we were to discuss them today or state them, most people would say, My take is that the way we're going to do, I mean, real estate transactions in the next 10 years is going to be profoundly changed. And because mentalities, not only from consumer standpoint, but from professional standpoint, I've changed dramatically. 10, 12 years ago, I was told, you know, real estate, that's a physical industry. It's slow-moving. People are conservative. We don't need technology. We don't need data. It's local, blah, 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 blah. Today I say this, people say, hey, no, of course not. But that's the biggest change, because generally that's culture or mentality that's the slowest. I mean, it's changing. That's behind us, which means that ahead of us, we've got, I mean, a landscape of profound change in behaviors and solutions. And I'm looking forward to that. And I believe we're going to be one, hopefully, major actor at a European scale in building this for the benefit of consumers and professionals alike. And too often I have heard that if the ones or the former win, then that's going to be at the expense of the latter, which I believe is not the case. Yes, the professionals that will not amend their ways will suffer, but those that actually accompany those tectonic moves that have started for the benefit of consumers, I think shouldn't worry about the future. And the future looks very bright, I think.
I think that was an amazing conversation. I'd like to thank you both, Sébastien. It was incredibly insightful. Dan, thanks a lot for connecting, and I hope you, the audience also got out of a little bit of a rabbit hole, just like I did. So thanks a lot for your attention. Thank you to the brilliant panelists. Thanks.